Sorry, got a bit of a sun happening. So welcome back, everybody. So I hope you've had a fantastic interactive session and have generated lots more great discussion as we've had throughout the day. So we now have the downward stretch of our sessions, which is hard to believe. It feels like these 2 days have flown by. So we have Jeff Popova-Clark, who's the founding partner of dataanalytics.com, which is a domain he's held since he was the first globally to secure it over 20 years ago in 1999, so a real forward thinker. Jeff's been doing data science for over 25 years, including training his first neural net in 1991. A true data science unicorn, he's led enterprise change initiatives in both Australia and overseas across multiple industries, including financial services, government, energy and telecommunications, pioneered multiple innovations, including forensic identity resolution, and discovered and named the globally renowned well-travelled road effect. Jeff is a certified TOGAF enterprise architect, Prince2 project manager, and CISA information systems auditor. He has several professional and academic publications supporting corporate governance, enterprise risk management, big data and behavioural criminology, and has lectured in information systems and statistics at several Queensland universities. Jeff holds 6 tertiary qualifications in information systems, mathematics, cognitive science, AI and business, and led the PwC Queensland's big data practice for over 5 years. Jeff's currently designing the Queensland Government's new whole of government data analytics capability and its platform, the QDAP, and has been retained to lead the implementation project as Director of Data Advisory Services. So welcome, Jeff, over to you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for that introduction. Thank you very much for that introduction. Look, that was such an introduction. I won't waste any more time talking about myself, but other than say thank you very much for the opportunity to chat with you guys this afternoon, and I hope your lunch was pleasing and we can make it an interesting finish to the conference in these last couple of speakers. So basically what we were hoping to do today was to look a bit behind the curtain about the whole process of automating data analytics and data sharing. And so I thought we'd start by looking at what the promise is out there and in the web. So what I've done is, actually, before we do that, just like you to meet Michelle. Michelle is the hero of our story. I won't give away why just yet. You're going to have to watch closely to see where Michelle pops up. But just want you to note Michelle. All right, so back to what I was talking about, which is I've gone around and had a look at all the vendors and seen what we have there. The promise is very high. We've got things like insights for everyone. Makes it sound very easy. Ease of use, powerful insights, easily add intelligence. So basically all you need to do is reach into the databases of all your applications, pull out all the data you need, mash it with the third-party data, apply some automated AI algorithms, and Bob's your uncle, out pops some insights, and you get some data value. So this is the way it works. It's something along these lines. Let's have a look. There he is. Okay, so there's ARTI. He's my artificial intelligence robot. So he's been taking all the data in the data lake, and he sifts through it, comes up with these fantastic ideas, and we implement them in the business, and Bob's your uncle. But is it really as easy as that? Let's have a look a bit behind the curtain. So this is what a human sees in an office. We can see assets, we can see staff, we can see interactions between people, so we can see workflows, we can see transgressions. Is that a dog in the office? I didn't think I see that one before. That's a dog. What's it doing in the office? Anyway, so the key is that's what a human sees, and we can see it quite clearly. We're bringing quite a bit to that interpretation of bits and bytes that we see in front of us there. And hopefully we will be able to be using that kind of information to make decisions in the future. But when we do a model, which is what a computer system is, it's a model of reality, what we're doing is we're decreasing the quality of that initial data. So basically one of the previous statisticians back in the 70s came up with this saying that all models are wrong, but some at least are useful. A guy called George Box. Anyway, what that means is that the model of reality that's sitting in your system is a simulacrum of the actual thing. So it looks something more like this. So we've lost a bit of color, It's a little bit fuzzier, but it doesn't look too bad. But our systems aren't really capturing everything in reality, are they? The accountants and the senior executives, they want to know why we're implementing these IT systems, and they ask for a return on investment. It's got to be cost justified. So ahead of the game, we've got to say, why are we going to capture all this data about reality? And why are we going to spend all this money putting all this data in and setting up these systems? Well, the easiest thing to do is to think about efficiency. So we'll tell the executives and we'll tell the accountants, we're going to improve the workflow, the processes within our organisation, and we will be able to do the same thing with less resources, or we'll even be able to do more things and maybe make a bit more revenue. So that's become the focus in the last 20 years, and us old timers who've been around remember a time before this, but definitely in the last quarter of a century, processes have become the real focus of information systems, and becoming efficient processes, so business process re-engineering and making them more efficient has become the goal. But I have to ask you, who asks for the return on investment for constructing a library? We don't know what that is going to do for our society, but there seems to be plenty of libraries around. So maybe there's some other reasons for putting in information systems. But nevertheless, the key is we put them in for process re-engineering and not much else. So we only capture the process piece, which means that now we've got a much fuzzier version of our reality because we're only capturing that information required to achieve that particular use case. Now, you might ask, why is it we only focus on processes in our IT systems? Well, it's because there were some fantastic wins in the early to mid 90s in the area of manufacturing, and organizations like SAP set up computer systems that optimized the factory processes and made significant improvements to those processes, really driving down costs and getting a lot of benefit for the business. And as a result, what we did is we started referencing those use cases. The problem is us humans, we tend to overgeneralize successful use cases, and even when they don't quite meet the same thing within our particular organization. But anyway, so we've gotten to the point where it's still already looking pretty ugly, but on top of that, after we've actually implemented the thing, what we've done is the world does actually evolve. Sorry, I'll just go back one little piece before showing that one. So the world does evolve, and we need investment to keep our original system up to date with how the world's evolving. So one example is one client I had, they were negotiating with their unions, and their unions managed to negotiate a 12-week half pay for maternity leave. Yes, that was a long time ago, I agree. But the point is that the computer system, as it was set up only a couple of years earlier, had not taken that into account. So, of course, the executive got on the phone to the vendor and said, how much money will it cost to improve our system so that it can handle this new requirement? And the figure made him fall over. So he decided not to do it. So what we're basically saying is that even this picture gets out of date over time as we get less and less reflecting of reality. So moving on, I just thought I'd just ask about integration. So the other thing, of course, we do is that we have a lot of information that we have got in external systems. And by external systems, I mean the ones that we're dealing with, our partners and our suppliers, we're dealing with on a daily basis. Those aren't in the systems that we're bringing into our data lakes, etc. So they're outside of our purview. So that's another area where we're getting less and less information of that picture. And you might ask, so what technology is the one, and it's a bit of an aside, but what's the technology that connects all of those various systems, the one inside your organizations, the ones with your other organizations, the ones that are basically in third parties and vendors and things like that? You might wonder which is the technology we're using the most. Is it APIs? You may have heard of those. Is it maybe extract, transform, load, or its cousin ELT? Maybe it's data virtualization or graph APIs. Maybe it's database replication or data streaming, or possibly direct query, batch processes, SFTP, Dropbox, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of ways that data can be done using these systems, but let me show you what is the #1 in the world connecting all those systems. Ah, it's Michelle. There you go, the hero of our story. The Michelle, and believe it or not, the majority of you have been a Michelle at one stage or another of your career, is dealing with all of those difficulties. And she's doing it with email, she's doing it with mobile phones, she's doing it with her worldview in her head. She's also doing it by just walking down the hallway and talking with people. So she's using all the capabilities at her disposal to integrate two systems and interface two systems that aren't interfaced electronically. Now, this happens a lot. Now, in fact, when we look through it, we start to see that in that wonderful diagram I showed you before we opened the curtain, there's Michelle's everywhere. They are actually providing the data out of the HR system before it gets to the data lake. They're actually doing the analysis to get the insights and ideas that we're getting so far. And I can see the efficiency people thinking, no, this is no good because that must be expensive. We've got humans involved. It's also no good from a provenance and a lineage point of view because Michelle might be changing the data. There's all these problems with having Michelle in there. But the facts are she's everywhere. So where were we? That's right. We were saying that we have the problem of evolving systems that cost money to keep up to date. We're also dealing with other organisations. So in reality, our data looks a bit more like that. Now, it gets even worse than that because we have situations where we're actually using workarounds. So when GST came in, I remember IT systems that used to be set up for doing the sales tax, the luxury sales tax, but that wasn't being used anymore. So a little bit later, we started using it for some of the overseas sales tax. So the field that was being used in the system, rather than getting the vendor to spend lots of money, was actually being used for one thing up until a certain date, and then it was being used for another thing at a later date. So really, we're twisting the reality. So that now we're getting a much better look at what our system looks like. Okay, so we're still presuming, of course, that we're getting perfect data entry, awesome metadata so we know what everything means, and the data that's being kept outside the org, everything that's going on is 100% uptime, so that systems never go down and never given us a blank. Now, we all know that that's not true either. So this is a very optimistic view of what's sitting in our systems. So let's just go back to where we were. So that's what the human sees on the right when they're looking around the office, and that's the capture of that digitally on the left. Okay. So let's move on and just see about the other side of the equation. So we know about the data. I mentioned ARTI. So ARTI is our artificial intelligence robot. He's fantastic. He never goes to sleep. He never gets sick. He never even gets tired and makes mistakes. He works 365 days a week, 24 hours a day, gives us consistent answers to everything we ask. He always answers the same, right? It might be not true and might be wrong, but it's always the same. Never gets annoyed, handles complexity beyond 7, because just remember, we're only human, so apparently we can only handle about 7 things in our head at one time. Mind you, that's an average for humans. My wife assures me that it's actually more like 10 for females and 2 or 3 for us males. So that is only an average. But nevertheless, ARTI can outperform even my wonderful wife, who can do 10 or 11 things at one time. So that's a wonderful set of things that he can do. But there's a problem for ARTI, and that is ARTI doesn't have a world view. He doesn't understand what's going on out there. He just knows what he's been taught in his particular domain. On top of that, he doesn't have a theory of mind. So he doesn't know what other people are thinking as he's going through looking at the data. So he's not colouring the data in like Michelle would do. And a great way of explaining that is this example, and I think people really understand it when you give them this example. So the people who are doing the driving algorithms like Tesla and Google and so on, they've been finding that most of the time, ARTI can drive a car without too much troubles. You just make sure you keep a good distance with the person in front of you. You make sure you stay in your lane. You make sure you stop when the light is red. All these things are very predictable. And in fact, if you think about it, you can probably do that pretty much on automatic yourself. So you've actually got two brains in your head. There's a guy called Kahneman who's written a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. The fast part of your brain, I like to think of it as the Tassie devil of your brain, doesn't think too much, but can do things very, very much on automatic and seems to be pretty tireless. And that's the way your brain likes to sit, nice and easy. Anyway, but ARTI is not like that. He's got one mode. Anyway, so he's coming along and he sees a pedestrian on the footpath there, and the pedestrian is looking up and seeing that behind ARTI there's another three set of cars that are all waiting. And it could be that, you know, maybe altruistic pedestrians saying, you know what, I'm only one person, there's at least four people in those cars, I'm going to let them through. So the pedestrian starts to wave to ARTI and say, you go through. But ARTI does not have a theory of mind. He doesn't look into and go, I know what that pedestrian is thinking. They're being altruistic and deciding that they should go through because I've got people behind me and they're deciding that they're worth less in terms of the next couple of seconds than what I am because I'm blocking the traffic. So I'll go through knowing that the pedestrian won't cross. ARTI's just not that clever. ARTI will sit there forever wondering, well, won't even be wondering why the pedestrian's waving, just won't trust that the pedestrian won't walk across the driveway as soon as he goes into the driveway. So ARTI will just sit there. And this is part of the difficulties of trying to get artificial intelligences to do the things that humans do. They don't have that world view. Right. So basically what I'm trying to say is ARTI's not that smart. Bit of a problem that, because now we're in a situation where, if you remember this beautiful diagram I showed you at the start that was based on all those powerful insights and intelligence everywhere type promises that we're getting made, what this amounts to is the following. Data that's not a great representation of reality because of all the limitations of our input systems, and also a not very smart artificial intelligence. Oh, by the way, here's our third character, Carl. He's the executive who paid for that AI project that we're running, and he's very upset about the rubbish that's coming out of this, this overall system. Okay. So, solutions. That's what you're after. Essentially, we have to come up with solutions, and as I've been told by my bosses in the past, we don't want to know just about problems, you've got to come up with solutions. Now, there's two kinds of solutions. There's solutions that are a bit of like pithy world peace type solutions, and then there's solutions that can actually be practical, but might not necessarily solve the entire thing. So hopefully we're running the gamut of those things, and we'll see what we come up with. One of the popular ways recently is just to presume that it's not a problem. I think recent events have probably shown that this isn't really working. People actually die when we presume that something's not a problem when it actually is. So let's reject that one. Okay, a really good one that Google and Facebook have come up with is that they control the entire data life cycle. So they run the websites and the mobile phone apps, and that's what gets into the data lake. And then they run their AI algorithms over it to come up with the ideas and the insights, and then they get the business value from that. Of course, this is enormously successful. Those are two of the biggest companies in the world that didn't exist only 20 years ago when I signed data analytics up. Sure wish I'd signed Google up. But anyway, the key being that at the end of the day, they control the entire life cycle of that data from go to woe. Now, in many cases, we don't. Now, this one is probably a little bit of the pithy pie in the sky type one solution, but I think it's worth mentioning. The focus of all the IT systems we're putting into agencies these days is all about business process reengineering, as I mentioned before. But essentially what comes down to is if we only focus on that and we're not trying to capture reality like we might do in a library or as we might study in a university, what ends up happening is we're only getting a small amount of the information that could be available to us to help make decisions. So what I'm trying to say is, let's not start with the processes in these systems and then come up with systems that implement processes, because that's a very narrow view of the potential value that we could be providing. in what we should be doing is working out what do we need, what strategic decisions do we need to make an answer for, and then drive back what data we need and make sure we capture that up front. Some of it might be about business process reengineering. Some of it might be about strategic ideas that we can come up with. And like I said before, if we took out the whole ROI approach and only went with the accountants, we would never have built a library ever. And yet most successful societies are the ones that have actually built libraries in universities because they keep the information for the next generation. And I suggest that possibly information systems should be focused on that. Now, I'm not going to say that this is a very practical solution, because we have a multi-billion-dollar industry all over the world where we focus on business process reengineering and ROI on IT systems. So that's not going to change overnight. But I would like to encourage you to resist this temptation to only go for those things that you can see in front of you that are going to give you a payback on system, because most of the payback on your systems is for things you've never imagined you would use them for. It's for capturing reality and having that understanding and going forward. I'm really excited about the digital twins approach, which is taking more of this approach. Just capture reality into digital areas and then see what comes from it. I think probably the most important one that's most practical and you can do in your area, and that is just build Michelle into your data endeavors. And as I was saying before, that process map that was showing the data coming out of all those systems, then getting through to the insights and the value, has got Michelle all the way through. And the natural inclination, if your only focus is on efficiency, is to reduce the number of Michelles. Well, I'd say that's the wrong focus. What we need to do is we need to make sure that our IT systems are augmenting Michelle. She has the worldview in her head. She has a theory of mind of all the other people that are being referenced by this digital data. So we need to empower our humans, not replace them. And this is something that certainly is within our power to do. So look, thank you very much for listening. I'd like you to acknowledge our leads, which were Michelle and Carl and ARTI. Now, both Michelle and Carl have asked me to answer the questions on their behalf. ARTI didn't answer my question when I asked him. He didn't seem to understand. So that's pretty much the end of my presentation, but I'm more than happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Jeff. I actually had a question right from the very first slide, I think it was, with all those fantastic promises from vendors. So I was wondering if you have any tips for us when we're considering new options and opportunities, because data is just constantly changing and analytics is constantly changing about what we're all going to use and which vendors and which data lakes are the best and all that kind of thing. How to see through some of those sales pitches and really think about those broader benefits that you talked about beyond just the return on investment and the things that we already know.
Yes, so you can hear me now? Oh. Just making sure you can hear me.
Oh, yes, we can. Thanks,
yes.
Jeff.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, so basically the key is don't be limited by what you can imagine you're going to use your analytics capability or this data set or whatever for. Most of it is opportunistic based on what you can see, and most of it's serendipitous. There's a whole stack of just so stories out there where they try to make it sound like, oh, the chief marketing officer and the chief information officer had this fantastic idea and they brought someone, a data scientist, on to work on this particular thing, and they did this model and out popped this fantastic value, and now our customer churn is down, or whatever the particular just so use case story is. In reality, what's actually happened is the data scientist got hired because they thought it would be cool to say they had one, and then the data scientist tried to get access to some data, got thrown on doing probably some visualizations in Tableau or Power BI or something, but in the background was working on something, and then noticed that there's these fantastic opportunities to improve the business quite by accident, and then went and talked to the chief marketing officer and the CIO about it, and they approved to go ahead with it, and away we go. So it was more of a serendipitous accident than it was a planned approach. So put these things in, because what they're doing is they're advancing your knowledge. Just like you put in a library, just like you put in a university, what you're trying to do is get the data emancipated and out to the innovative people out there. There is a lot of smart people. People don't come up with great ideas over there because they're smarter than us. They come up with great ideas over there because of the particular circumstances and the particular things they were thinking about and doing at the time. And that doesn't necessarily mean we can adopt it holus bolus, but what it meant is that we could give it a think and think, are we in the same situation as them? And if we are, maybe we can try what they tried. So always be humble and don't think that you're the smartest person in the room, and don't be so humble that you think everyone else is smarter than you. Just remember, we're all trying our hardest, but the most important thing is let's get the data out so that we're empowering everybody to be innovative. And in terms of choosing, I think you've just got to go with the most flexible capabilities. Certainly that's the way we're going with the Queensland Government analytics platform. We are trying to be as generic as we possibly can with regards to being able to ingest all sorts of different types of data in all sorts of different ways. We know that there's legacy data from systems that are left over from the 70s still out there, so they don't have APIs, funnily enough. And we also know that there's new stuff happening with mobile phone JSON streams coming through, and all this simulation work that's going on. So there's a great variety out there. So be ready for anything in terms of capability, build capability. Don't just sit with a specific use case you know about up front. And I know this is very radical. It's complete opposite to the way the entire program governance, IT program governance is set up. But I think just looking at how things have gone over the last 25 years, we can see that the improvement in IT project success has improved almost nothing in that time. So those IT program governance processes, I'm afraid, haven't been working overly well. I think the key is we've got to go back to, we're getting information systems to understand reality. I don't know if I answered your question there.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think you're right. A lot of this is resonating. And we just had a question. Could you explain the data twin approach?
Yes, so digital twins is coming out of the geospatial area. So what they're doing there is they are just using buildings as an example, and that's probably the first thing that was tried. At the same time that architects are designing up a building, that's being captured into programs now where they have every system that's inside that building captured digitally. And so what they can do is they can look at the things such as the power usage of the building, where the sun's going over, the shadowing, airflows through the offices, using the lifts up and down. They can keep on just capturing the reality of that building digitally. And in many cases, they don't really know what they're going to do with it. Ostensibly, the upfront concept, a bit like when Google went around and captured every street in the world, which is an amazing decision to make. But they did that without fully knowing everything that could be used for. And wasn't that a great decision? Google Earth and Google Maps have been fantastic. But a digital twin is the similar concept for the building. We might decide, okay, let's simulate a pollution on the right-hand side of the building. How is that going to affect the airflows? Well, suddenly we can simulate that through our digital twin. What happens if we throw in a new wing on the building, or we decide to connect it to another building next door using this? What are the implications for airflow, electricity usage, shadows, and so on? All these things are able to be done with these digital twins. And I'm really believing that that's probably going to be the future. And how we do most things is we do some sort of digital model of reality rather than trying to control it fully as just a process flow.
That's such an interesting description. I think can you play on the CSIRO website for a demo of the digital twins? Your description actually really made me realise why this is happening, and I'd sort of thought about it from a really practical perspective of building design and thinking about where the sun falls and stuff like that. But of course, we all need to start thinking far more broadly. And so for Luciana, if you go to the CSIRO, that they will definitely have some materials there on their digital twins. So Jeff, thank you so much for sharing a really interesting presentation. I know that I'm a little guilty of rolling my eyes about Michelle's involvement in every single bit of data that we hold, so I'll have to celebrate her role a bit more in the future.
That'd be great.
Thanks, Jeff. So we'll now move on to our last session of the day from Rob Wilkins. So Rob is a business professional with extensive experience in digital learning and human performance and knowledge information management. Rob brings his unique perspective as a practitioner, a learner and researcher in corporate learning and knowledge management. His experience has been